Welcome back. If you had seen part 2 of the making a Hosfeld bender video, you would have seen a bit in there where I talk about my vise that got broken when I was trying to bend the feet on the bender. This video is going to be about building a new vise. At the moment I have a very small one, just G clamped or C clamped depending where you live, onto the bench. So I've been scouring around the internet. I actually saw a video by Fireball Tools quite a long time ago, and it was on a vise that he made, and it was a tube vise. So it has a the moving jaw is a tube, and it fits into a fixed jaw tube here, and the lead screw goes down the center and it screws into another bit that's welded right at the back, so it pulls the jaw right in from the center, so you don't get this split moving jaw situation that you have here, which makes these vices a lot weaker. I'm going to try and make that type of design. I've seen a couple of other videos on YouTube. There's about 4 of them altogether that make this style of vise. A couple of them are in different languages, so you have to have the translator running in the background and read what they're saying. But it's a really nice design and it looks like a very strong vise. So I'm going to go ahead and make one of those styles of vise. So these are the parts that I'm going to use. There's actually some plate that I haven't got on the table here at the moment. It's 13mm plate that came as part of a drill press stand when I bought a second-hand drill press. So that will come in handy. And that plate will be cut out to these kind of shapes here. So this is the movable jaw and the fixed jaw, and there'll be one of these on each side. So 4 pieces altogether. Your jaws are in here, so they can be soft jaws or they could be hardened jaws, either way. But for the rest of it, the lead screw that goes through, I've got this 20mm or M20 all thread. This is 8.8, so it's kind of a hard steel. There is a tube here, and the all thread goes into that tube, and you have some nuts or a piece of M20 threaded bit of steel that goes in here and is welded in here. So when the all thread screws in, that's what winds the movable jaw in. This is going to be the part of the movable jaw, so the piece that gets welded to this these sides, and it goes inside this bigger tube at the back. And I don't have anything that this fits snugly into, so I've got this bit of angle iron here, and it fits in with this radius edge here and the radius edge in there. It fits in nice and tight, so I'll be able to get that, once it's cleaned up, to slide in there nice and freely. Might be a little bit hard to sort of get the idea of how this works, but I'll put some links down in the details section of the videos that I've seen. So there's 4 people so far on YouTube that I've been able to find that make these types of tube vices. So if you want to have a look at how they're made and how they work, then certainly go off and have a look at those links there. The first thing I'm going to start with this vise build is to build the outer tube, which this inner tube goes into or slides into, and I'm going to build that out of this angle iron here. And I'm going to trim it along the top here and trim it down there, and then have 2 halves that go together and weld it together. So I'll start with cutting this angle iron in half. So I've got 2 pieces, and I think that's going to be plenty of length there for me, and that tubing there is plenty long enough as well, so that'll have to be cut at some point. Now I did buy the Fireball tool plans from Jason's site. The vise that he built and the measurements are far bigger than what I'm going to be building here, so I'm going to have to scale it down a bit, and it's going to be a bit of working out how that's going to go. The plans were like $5. You know, I won't be building it off the plan, but at least there's stuff in there that I can use. I've cut down the angle iron to the right size here and cleaned it all up. I've cut some chamfer on here as well, and that will assist with the welding. There's a chamfer here, and then this piece just fits on like that, and then we just weld up in this valley here and down here as well. So if I hold it quite tight, it's kind of a snug fit in there, and I'm hoping to tack it in place, and if this becomes tight to get out, I'll have to knock it out, and then I'll just clean it up a little bit on the outside of the, you know, the smaller diameter here, so that it will slide in again. I don't want to use any shims, and the reason is because this profile here is the same profile as here, so it registers in this corner here and also the top corner here, so that actually doesn't have any movement in there now. It's nice and it still slides, although there's a bit of effort, so I'm going to need to clean it up a little bit on the belt grinder here, but you know, it'll still slide, and it just fits in there perfect. So that's the way I want it when this is all welded up and finished. And I just have to be a bit careful with distortion and just tack it in place first, and then just do little welds, and I guess let them cool down in between the welds. I got the fixed jaw tube all welded together, so that's all come up pretty good. Now, and I knew this was going to happen, the smaller tube used to slide in there. You know, it was quite firm. I didn't really clamp it really hard when I welded it. It was just to stop the plates from moving around, and tacked it on there, and then I took the tube out because I think it would have shrunk too much and it would have been too hard to get it out. So it is tight going in there now, and probably a little bit too tight. So what I'm going to do, instead of taking this bar down, I'm going to cut this on the angle, and so we've got the two parts, and then I will deal with getting the tube through those two parts after I've cut it. It's going to be easier to get down the longer piece once I've cut the angle on here and cut a shorter piece off. And once we've done that, I'm going to start working on the jaws. You know, the front jaw here that's on the movable bar, and the fixed jaw here, which actually goes right down onto a base plate there. So I'll be designing or working out what sort of shapes these are, and they will be cut out of probably the 13mm steel that I have. I finally got the jaws done. Man, that was a lot of cutting and a lot of grinding. So how it works is these are together at the moment. I haven't split them apart because I want to mill this out in the milling machine so that we can get that one and the movable jaw recesses the same. But once that's done, these will be split. One will be on each side here, and they get welded onto this tube. Here's the offcut for the front of the tube there, and that will go on to the tube that actually goes up in here and be welded on there. And then these will be welded on the side there. There's been a few videos that I've seen, and I can't recall, even none of them, or maybe only one of them, had a piece that went onto this bar. Most of them just had the movable jaws welded straight onto the bar. And what that means is that it comes in, you know, another 8mm each side. So the jaws don't actually line up the flush on the outside. So because I had to cut that off anyway, I was just going to use it as a kind of like a spacer, and to give me more flexibility when I go ahead and work on the bit here that the all thread goes through with the bearing and thrust bearings and stuff like that. So here we are in the mill. I've got the flat piece at the bottom. That's the bit that was on the workbench that you saw before. So I know that's flat, and everything else kind of works out pretty much in the right place once we register on that. So I've put that right at the bottom of the vise, and everything looks pretty straight here. So I think we're going to be pretty good. I've put a clamp on here because the welds, or the tack welds that I used to weld these together just to clean them up, I know they're going to be quite thin now because I've ground most of them off. So, you know, I think a bit of a bash with a hammer, these things would just fly apart. So it's clamped at the bottom. I've got this can't twist clamp at the top here, and I'm just hoping that it's not too high and going to cause too much vibration here. So I got the fixed jaws and the movable jaws pretty much finished now. Maybe I'll put a chamfer on the outside here, just to give it a bit more, you know, of a better look, I guess. But I'll work on that later. So these are all machined out the same. Might not look straight. This one's kind of low. I really need about 4 hands when I hold this together to try and clamp it. But basically, this centerpiece would be welded to the bar. The bar will be chopped off here somewhere because it's right at the back. So that's about the length we need. And then the bar just slides in and out. I did have to relieve the ends here because the ends had closed up a bit of this outer tube, and it was tight on the middle bar. But other than that, it's pretty. There's a little bit of play there, but not a lot. The next part for the jaws would be obviously to weld them onto the respective tubing here, and then there's a piece of this. It's around about 30 millimeters by 16 millimeters, and that goes one piece here and one piece here. That gets welded on, and then your jaws that you use for clamping will get screwed onto here, either through the back or through the front with countersinks. But what I'll do now is I really want to work on the front part here with the bearing and the all thread. That allows me to then wind the vise together, so when I have these bits here to go in here, you know, I can line them up, and that will bring everything together nice and square when I go to weld these front movable jaws on. I welded this piece onto the center tube here, and it works absolutely fine, so no issues with that. You saw me add some plates on the side here just to keep it all square while I welded it up. So the next part is to get our main thrust bearing mounted on the plate at the front here. So there's 2 bearings here. This is the smallest bearing I've got. It was out of my mill. When I pulled the mill down, I changed the bearings, although the bearings looked fine. So it'll be perfect for the vise here. The problem is it's quite big, but I think we can still make it fit in here. So it's just 3 or 4 millimeters each side. So I'm going to use a piece of this. This is 1 inch or 25 millimeter chunk of steel. And I'm going to cut a piece out and then bore in a recess here for the outer bearing shell to go into, and then the inner bearing will go on there. And then there will be a plate, if I can find the plate over here. It will go on the top. It'll have a hole in it, of course, for the shaft to come through. And then I'm going to bolt all of this down and onto the front here. So it's going to be made so that it can be pulled apart if I need to get into it to do something. And similarly, at the back there, I'll make it so it's bolted on the back, so if I need to get it apart, I can get it apart. I do apologise, you've just sat through 5 or 6 minutes of building a lot of parts on fast forward. But if I did put commentary to those parts, then, you know, this would have gone on for over an hour. But I think from what you've seen, you've probably got a fair idea of what the parts are for and how they fit together. I've got them all finished, and I'll just go through how this gets assembled. So we've got the nut. I'll put a thread in here. I threaded this in, ground back the galvanized part there and welded it on and just tidied it up in the lathe. And you saw me bluing everything. This is just the outer piece here. The rest of the vise will probably be painted, but this is kind of a nice finish as well. So not everything is the same color, if that makes sense. Also with this part here, this is the bearing housing. I put a couple of holes in the back here, and that's to punch out that part of the bearing there. So if I ever need to replace the bearing in the vise, I'm able to do that quite easily. So basically how it all fits together, the bearing goes in there. I've actually marked the block with a couple of dots here, so I know that's the bottom, so that'll fit on the front like that. Cap goes on. Again, there should be some marks on here. There they are, they line up. And then the shaft goes through the centre there. And it just fits in there like that. The thrust bearing goes on there, like that. And I'm probably going to fast forward this bit because I've got to put the nuts on and they've got to go all the way down. So that's it, and that just spins beautifully. That's very, very nice. That's going to just make it so easy to wind this vise in. And that just fits in the front. Like that. And then we have our 4 screws. So it's all bolted on the front here. It's chamfered around, looks quite nice, and just curved the front here around on the front plate. Put some countersink bolts in here just to make it flush, and basically that just spins, yeah, very, very nicely. So I'll make up a handle that has the same hex size here a bit later on. So that's the front all complete. And the next part will be to work on the back part here. Now how this vise works is you have a plate at the back, not this plate, and there will be a different one without a hole, that gets screwed on the back, similar to what I had on the front. There's a bit of tubing that's welded to the plate, so this is hollow tubing, and that slides down this all thread, you know, up to somewhere up here. Let me just move that across. Somewhere up here to towards the front of the larger tube, and in here we put a nut for the all thread, so an M20 nut, and I'll make that up on the lathe. So that'll be a bit of, I think this diameter is probably about 27 or 28 millimeters. So I'll get a bit of round stock and I'll put a M20 thread in it, and then I'll push it in here and I'll plug weld it around a few places, maybe a weld around the top here. So that goes on, that screws onto the all thread. Your plate is welded onto the back here, and then the plate is bolted onto the back of the larger tube here. And effectively what's happening then, when you are turning the handle, you're pulling the front part of the vise, the smaller tube, right in the center. All the power is right down the center of the tubing, which works a lot better than a traditional vise where you have, you know, a split at the bottom and then the nut sort of bolted to the bottom of the vise. I want to make this back part up first, and then once I've get that done, I'll weld on our fixed jaws and our movable jaws at the front, and then that's almost it for the vise. I mean, I want to make a base for it, a swivel base, but I don't think I'm going to get that in this video. This kind of gone on quite a bit longer than what I thought, so maybe we'll do that in a part 2. As you saw there, I got the fixed jaws and the movable jaws welded onto their respective tubes here. I've assembled the vise. It's not a final assembly because of course it needs to be painted, just to show it sort of working. So it's in a working state now. Just ignore these bits here. These are just spaces to sort of counteract these being pulled in by the welding. So there's going to be some jaws I'm going to make here, jaw plates I guess they're called, and then the jaws will be bolted to those jaw plates and they will be welded on here, probably with a bit of steel in here for support on both sides. You saw me chamfering the radius around here, or taking the edge off. Just, it's just for aesthetics, just to make it look a little bit better. So next video will be these jaw plates and the jaws. Also a swivel base I want to build for this vise as well. And I've got to make the handle for this big nut at the front here. At the moment I've just got a pair of vice grips on there. The functionality of it, it's quite good. Clamps very nice, and there's no jaws there yet. It's just sitting in those recesses, but that is in there quite solid. So I'm very pleased with the outcome of this, and it has taken a bit of time, and I'm gonna have to finish it off in another video, otherwise this would sort of drag on too long. So if you want to see how I make the swivel vise and those jaws, come back in part 2 once it's done and posted. And as always, thanks for watching.